The whiskey burned cleaner than her lies. That's what I was thinking when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that cracked through the silence like gunshots. I almost dropped the carburetor I'd been cleaning into the solvent tank. Nobody knocks here. Not since the divorce. Not since the funeral. Not since I carved my name into this patch of Montana dirt and dared the world to bother me. Through the warped cabin glass, I saw a silhouette too thin to be real, backlit by the last piss-yellow streaks of winter sun. My hands knew her before my brain did. 30 years of muscle memory gone stiff as the engine parts on my workbench. She looked like a taxidermy version of herself. Margaret's cheekbones jutted sharp enough to slit the twilight, her cashmere coat swallowing what little remained of her. But her eyes? Same glacial blue, same calculated tremble. "Harold," she breathed, the word fogging between us. "The doctors say it's terminal." A pause ripe for sympathy. I let it rot. Funny how cancer patients still wear $300 haircuts. I stepped aside. Not kindness, curiosity. She floated in, all tragic grace, fingers fluttering to her throat like a silent film star. That's when I saw it. Or didn't. The absence. Her left hand, bare except for the ghost of the diamond I'd buried myself in debt to buy in '89. The one she'd pawned 6 months before leaving me, claiming it reminded her of better days. "Still off the grid, I see," she said, glancing at the solar panels I'd installed where our bed once stood. Her voice carried the same vinegar-soaked honey I'd choked on for decades. "You always did romanticize suffering." I watched her fingers, those nervous, ringless fingers, trace the edge of my salvage wood table. They lingered near the cracked frame of our daughter's 8th-grade photo. Sarah's smile, frozen mid-laugh beneath spiderweb glass. Margaret didn't look at it. "Lung cancer," she announced to the elk steak I'd been seasoning. 6 months, maybe less. A wet cough punctuated the lie, theatrical as a church play. I noted the way her eyes darted to the land deeds on my fridge, held by a magnet from the same Tahoe resort where she'd first fucked her golf pro. "Need a drink." I grabbed the bourbon, 2 chipped mugs. Let her think she's steering. She accepted, knuckles whitening around ceramic. "I want to make things right. Before I—" The sentence dissolved into another cough. No phlegm, no rattle. Just the dry heaves of a woman who'd practiced sorrow in motel mirrors. I sipped slow, watching her throat convulse as she swallowed. "Funny timing," I said. "Heard they're rezoning the valley. Prime development land now." Her blink lasted a heartbeat too long. "This isn't about money." "Course not." I nodded at her naked hand. "Lose something." Color flooded her neck. The same blotchy tell she'd had when lying about bridge games that lasted till dawn. The treatments my fingers swelled. She tucked both hands under her thighs like guilty children. "You kept the place nice." For a hermit. The compliment tasted fouler than the chemo breath she was faking. I let my gaze drift to the window where Clara's Lexus idled half a mile down the access road, exhaust curling into the pines. Margaret followed my stare and nearly spilled her drink. "Who's your chauffeur?" I asked. "Just hospice care." "Right." I refilled her mug, watching the amber liquid tremble. "Must be rough, dying in luxury." Her laugh came out a strangled thing. "You always saw the worst in people." "No." I leaned back, studying the way moonlight caught the empty space on her finger. "I just stopped pretending not to." The wood stove crackled. Somewhere outside, the Clark Fork River iced over with a sound like bones snapping. Margaret opened her mouth, another rehearsed line about redemption, I'd bet, when the landline rang. My hotline for emergencies, Sarah's old pediatrician, and the liquor store that still delivers. I watched her flinch at the shrill tone. Watched her eyes dart to the phone like it might bite. Let it ring 3 times. 4. "Aren't you going to answer?" she finally hissed. I smiled. "Why? You expecting a call?" Her porcelain composure slipped just enough. Just enough to see the cracks. Just enough to make the game worth playing. I picked up on the 5th ring. "Harold? It's Ed down at the title office." My lawyer's voice boomed through the receiver. "You sitting down? That quiet little parcel of yours by the interstate." "Not now." I interrupted, loud enough for Margaret's ears. "Family emergency." I hung up slowly, deliberately. Margaret's mug hit the table with a clatter. "Who was that?" Wrong number. I swirled my drink, ice cubes clinking like dice. Probably. Outside, the Lexus headlights flicked off. Game on. The ice in her drink hadn't even melted when I caught my first lie. Lung cancer patients don't carry prescriptions for your sodiol. I know that chalky brown tablet anywhere. Spent 6 months crushing them into applesauce for Sarah when her liver started failing. The bottle tumbled out of Margaret's purse when she reached for a tissue, her performance of grief so elaborate I half expected a standing ovation. You were always sentimental, she sniffed, following my stare to the medication. Her fingers spider-walked across the table to cover mine. Can't we focus on what little time we have left? I let her touch linger. Let her think the old magic still worked. Funny, I said, tapping the prescription label. Last I checked, bears don't get cirrhosis. Her recoil was poetry. The cabin's single bulb caught the sweat blooming above her collagen lips. Complications, she snapped, yanking the bottle back. The chemo is a hell of a drug, I finished, leaning back. Tell me, Meg, they still use platinum derivatives for lung cases? Or did they switch to that new immunotherapy? Silence thicker than the grease under my fingernails. She recovered fast, tears materializing like sleight of hand. Why must you punish me? The waver in her voice almost convinced me. Almost. I just want it. Sarah's birthday's next week. I thought we could. The mention of our daughter hit like a sucker punch. 20 years since the crash, and her name still tasted of blood and gasoline. Margaret knew it. Weaponized it. Watched my throat work as I stared at the repaired photo frame, Sarah's smile now held together with epoxy and spite. You want absolution? My voice came out gravel road rough. Confess to the priest at St. Bart's. He gives better rates. Her purse gaped open when she stood, a black yawn of designer leather. I counted 3 heartbeats before the dizzy spell hit, another Oscar-worthy stagger that conveniently knocked over her chair. While she clutched the countertop, I palmed the business card peeking beneath her compact. Elias Voss, ESQ. Estate Planning and Trust Litigation. The address was printed over a watermark of scales. Not justice, commerce. Sit, I barked, all faux concern. Before you crack your head open. She slumped into the chair, milking the trimmer in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. I almost laughed. The last time she'd apologized was 93, when she accidentally donated Sarah's favorite sweater to Goodwill. 2 days later, I found it in Clara's closet. Tell me about the treatments, I said, pouring more whiskey. Keep the enemy talking. That's what my army sergeant dad taught me. Her sigh could have wilted roses. Radiation burns, hair falling out in clumps, the smell. Bullshit. The word hung between us, sharp as the scalpel that had carved Sarah's name into her headstone. Margaret froze mid-sip, bourbon glinting on her upper lip. Liver disease explains the jaundice, I continued, conversational as a coroner. The weight loss. I gestured at her sallow complexion. Glow. But lung cancer. I leaned forward, close enough to smell her Chanel No. 5, same scent she'd worn the night I found her in the Marriott with a stranger's hand up her skirt. You be wheezing like a broken vacuum. Her slap came fast, but I caught her wrist an inch from my face. The bones felt hollow, a bird's wing frozen mid-migration. You're sick, she spat. So I've heard. I released her, watching the calculations flicker behind her eyes. Outside, an engine growled to life, Clara's Lexus creeping closer. Margaret heard it too. Panic flashed across her face, there and gone like a fish breaking water. I should go, she whispered, clutching her purse to her chest. This was a mistake. Was it? I blocked the door, Elias Voss card burning in my pocket. Funny thing about trusts, they're like carburetors. Only work if all the parts are connected. Her breath hitched. I pressed harder. Your father's will have that marital clause, didn't it? The one he added after catching you with the tennis instructor? Color drained from her face. Score 1 for the mechanic. What's the deadline? I growled. A month? A week. The tears came real this time, a thin, bitter things. You don't understand. Clara's in trouble. They'll kill her. The landline screamed again. This time, I answered. Mr. Cresswell? A woman's voice, crisp as new bills. This is Lila from First Interstate Trust. We need to verify your marital status for her. I hung up, smiled. Watched Margaret's last hope crumble like ash. Still think I'm just a grease monkey? Her silence was sweeter than revenge. The neon core sign at Bud's Tavern flickered like a distress beacon. I nursed a lukewarm PBR, watching condensation pool around the pistol grip of the .38 I kept holstered beneath my jacket. Not paranoid, prepared. Clara had a taste for poison long before Margaret perfected it. Saw your ex's shadow in here last week, Bud said, polishing glasses with a rag dirtier than his tax returns. Fancy lady. Smelled like a perfume counter. He nodded toward the dartboard where Clara once accidentally impaled my Levi's with a bullseye shot. Asked about land prices near the interstate. Real curious like. Ice crackled down my spine. The trust fund wasn't enough. They wanted my acres too. I traced the water ring on the bar, remembering Clara's smirk at Sarah's 8th birthday party. You really think a muffler shop manager can afford ponies? She'd hissed to Margaret, loud enough for Sarah's tears to drown out the cake candles. Bud slid over a napkin with an address scrawled in motor oil grease. Her rentals parked at the Moose Creek Lodge. Black Escalade. Temporary plates. I crumpled the napkin, the gears grinding. Clara always rented convertibles, top down, music blaring, a middle finger to the world. An SUV meant cargo space. For what? The answer came at mile marker 43. Through the sleet, the Escalade's brake lights glowed like demon eyes behind my cabin. I killed my headlights, approaching on foot with the predatory calm of a wolf circling wounded elk. Mud-caked tires, New Mexico plates, back seat piled with surveyor maps, and a metallic case stamped biohazard. My gut churned. Last time I saw that insignia was on the cooler holding Sarah's donated organs. A glint in the cup holder froze me. Margaret's missing diamond ring, nestled beside a half-empty bottle of Xanax. My fist clenched around the Gerber knife in my pocket. 20 years ago, I'd found that same ring in Clara's toiletry bag after she comforted Margaret during our separation. She's better off without your mediocre genes, Clara had said, flicking cigarette ash on Sarah's tricycle. Ice cracked underfoot. The Escalade's trunk flew open. Looking for a tour, Handy Harold? Clara's voice sliced through the dark, all nicotine and venom. She emerged holding a geological core sampler, the kind used to test mineral deposits. Relax. We're just ensuring Margaret's security. I noted the we. Noticed the fresh grading marks on my north pasture. Zoning laws require owner consent for surveys. Her laugh echoed off the mountains. You'll consent. Once the hospital bills start. She stepped closer, reeking of ambition and Estee Lauder. Or maybe when they revoke Sarah's plot at Hillside Cemetery. Graves aren't free, you know. The knife handle bit into my palm. I saw Sarah's casket lowering, Clara's hand slipping to drop her rosary into the grave, a final theft. Here's a counteroffer. I kicked the core sampler into the ravine. Touch my land again. I'll mail the IRS those offshore accounts you think Daddy hid. For the first time in 40 years, Clara looked startled. You're bluffing. I smiled, pulling the casino chip from my pocket, the one she'd left in my bed the night Margaret filed for divorce. Cayman Islands still honoring these at the teller window? Her slap missed as I turned toward the cabin. Let her stew. Let her panic. Inside, I opened the metal case. Not medical supplies, soil samples, and a notarized deed transfer draft. Margaret's signature looped where mine should be, dated 3 days after her terminal diagnosis. The wood stove ate the documents hungrily. I poured bourbon over the ashes, watching blue flames dance. Paranoia? That was for amateurs. Time to rebuild the engine. The china shattered with satisfying violence when Margaret fainted. I watched her crumple against the stove, back arched like a silent movie heroine, one limp hand strategically overturning the blueberry pie I'd baked from Sarah's recipe. Syrupy filling oozed across the floorboards toward my boots, the smell cloying and false as her eyelash flutters. Medication. In my bag, she gasped, clawing at her throat. I stepped over the ceramic shards, taking my sweet time. Her Louis Vuitton satchel yielded treasures, a half-empty bottle of Robitussin with the safety seal intact, 3 empty Tiffany boxes, and a notepad scribbled with dollar amounts next to my property's parcel number. The cough syrup label peeled back under my thumbnail, revealing a ChemLab barcode for glycerin and red dye number 40. Stage left, Meg, I drawled, dangling the bottle above her performance. Your understudy's in the wings. Her eyes snapped open, fury burning through the faux pallor. How dare you? Use your daughter's pie recipe as bait? I kicked the satchel toward her. You started this war when you brought Clara's shopping list to my table. She scrambled upright, blueberry viscera staining her designer blouse. Clara's right, you've gone feral. Funny. I uncapped the fake medicine, sniffing the cherry-scented lies. Last I checked, hyenas don't forge prescriptions. The slap of her palm on the table sent Sarah's photo frame trembling. We needed security. After you bled me dry in the divorce. Bled you? The laugh tore from my throat raw and jagged. I kept the debts. You kept the house. The cars. The fucking silverware. Her finger jabbed the air between us, diamondless and trembling. Daddy's trust fund requires marriage for release, you spiteful bastard. You think I wanted to crawl back to your squalor? The cabin exhaled. Somewhere in the pines, an owl shrieked laughter. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, watching comprehension flood her face. Marital clause? Huh? Ice cubes clinked like a jailer's keys. Let me guess, old Gerald added that after catching you blowing the pool boy? Margaret's mascara bled black tears. Clara said, she said you'd never check the fine print. Clara thinks mechanics can't read. I slid the trust documents across the table, coffee-stained and dog-eared from my late-night research. Spoiler alert, we can. She stared at her father's embossed letterhead like it might bite. You knew. Since the night you collapsed. I tapped the forged cough syrup. Pro tip, real cancer patients don't waste energy on community theater. Her sob hit a genuine octave. He'll kill her, Harold. The people Clara owes. Should have considered that before mortgaging your dignity. I palmed the burner phone from my toolbox, redialing the last number. Clara's screech crackled through the speaker. Told you to seduce him, not confess. Margaret lunged, but I held the phone aloft. Say hello, ladies. Silence. Then the click of Clara's lighter, her exhale poisonous. Name your price, grease monkey. I watched Margaret shrink into her lies, her father's trust burning between us like a funeral pyre. Already did. I disconnected, nodding at the documents. Gerald required marriage? Fine. We'll have ourselves a shotgun wedding. Margaret's whimper tasted sweeter than revenge. Relax, darling. I crushed the fake cough syrup under heel, red dye bleeding like a fresh kill. I'll even let you keep the ring. Outside, Clara's engine roared to life. Let them come. The firelight glinted off the brass ratchet in Gerald's old desk clock as I pried it open. A wedding gift from the bastard who'd spent 3 decades calling me that oil-stained mistake. Inside the hollow gears, wedged between cobwebs and contempt, I found his final joke. A microfilm canister labeled trust specifics in that sadistic cursive he'd used to correct Sarah's thank you notes. The library microfiche machine whirred like a time bomb. Grainy scans revealed Gerald's masterpiece, a $2 million trust maturing on March 15th, 10 days out, contingent on Margaret being happily wedded per his 1994 amendment. The irony curdled my coffee. He'd added the clause the same week I caught Margaret blowing his stockbroker in a Jaguar leased with my overtime pay. Happily, my ass. The document's subclauses were landmines, monthly marital assessments by a private investigator, mandatory joint tax filings, the whole gilded cage. But the kicker? Page 7, footnote 12, funds forfeited if beneficiary expires pre-disbursement. I was still laughing when Clara's stilettos cracked through the library's silence like gunshots. Tick-tock, handy Harold. She slammed a foreclosure notice for my cabin onto the microfilm reader. Sign the marriage license by Friday, or the bank gets your precious junkyard. I rotated the notice, noting the shaky notary stamp. Forging Margaret's signature now? She's not dead yet. Her Chanel-scented snarl fogged the screen. You'll play house, collect the cash, and vanish. Or have you forgotten what happened to Sarah's? The wrench from my tool belt met her ribs before the threat fully left her lips. Not hard enough to bruise, just enough to remind her where we were. Public library. Security cameras. Her word against a decorated Gulf War vet. Careful, Clara. I tapped the microfilm's expiration clause. Dead brides can't cash checks. Her face cycled through emotions like a slot machine before landing on cold calculation. You always were sentimental about that brat. She produced a Ziploc bag from her snakeskin purse, Strands of Sarah's hair from her first haircut, stolen from our memory box. Imagine what else I've kept safe. The overhead fluorescents buzzed like angry hornets. I counted to 15. The age Sarah was when the semi plowed into her school bus, before responding. You're right. I gathered the microfilm with exaggerated care. Let's discuss terms, partner. Her smirk died when I handed her a mechanic's invoice listing her debts to the Nevada Gaming Commission. Itemized. Interest included. How? Your Cayman courier works cheap. I nodded toward the librarian stamping romance novels, a former Army cryptographer who traded Sigint for Sandra Brown. Turns out $200,000 in blackjack losses leave stains even bleach can't touch. Clara's clutch on Sarah's hair faltered. I snatched the bag, tucking it into my breast pocket where her heartbeat used to live. Here's the deal. I powered off the microfilm reader, plunging us into sudden darkness. We'll have your shotgun wedding. But I picked the venue, the vows, the prenup. Her phone buzzed with a Venmo alert. $50,000 transferred from her escrow account to Sarah's memorial fund. Tick-tock, I whispered. Outside, the first spring thaw cracked the ice on the Clark Fork River. The sound carried the sweet melody of engines turning over after a long winter's sleep. The bourbon tasted like victory. I raised my glass to Clara, the hidden microphone in my belt buckle humming softly against my gut. To partnership, I said, pouring her a triple shot of her own stolen Macallan. Turns out we make better criminals than family. She clinked her glass, shark eyes glinting. Don't get sentimental on me, gearhead. Once the trust clears. Her manicured finger drew a slit-throat motion across her sister's vacant chair. The recording device, a repurposed O2 sensor from Sarah's first car, caught every syllable. I leaned back, playing the affiable rube. And Margie? What's her cut? Clara's laugh sprayed Scotch mist. Dying whores don't need trust funds. She produced a geologist's report from her crocodile clutch, slapping it beside the prenup. But since you're feeling nostalgic, the document reeked of greed and shale oil. Core samples from my North pasture showed enough lithium deposits to power every Tesla in Silicon Valley. My fingers twitched toward the wrench in my pocket. Sarah's initials still etched in the grip from when she'd helped rebuild her dirt bike. Backup plan? I asked, voice smooth as synthetic oil. Contingency. She tapped the surveyed dates, all conducted during Margaret's tearful visits. Developers pay triple if the seller's motivated. The pieces clicked, the forged deed transfers, the midnight soil samples, the Escalade's cargo area large enough for a shallow grave. My land wasn't leverage, it was the endgame. I stood abruptly, chair screeching like a wounded animal. Need to take a leak. Clara's stiletto hooked around my ankle. Don't flood the bathroom, lover boy. We've got contracts to sign. In the mirror, I watched my reflection practice rage. The O2 sensor kept transmitting, Clara's phone chiming with alerts from her offshore accounts, the rustle of her adjusting the fake notary seal. When I returned, she'd spread blueprints across the table. My cabin replaced by condos, Sarah's memorial garden, paved for a Tesla supercharger station. Progress, Clara purred, tracing the development's phallic skyscraper. I smiled, pulled out the vintage Zippo Sarah had shoplifted for my 40th birthday, flicked it open, the flame catching the blueprint's edge before Clara could scream. Careful, I murmured as fire consumed her billion-dollar dreams. You're spilling your drink. Her slap left bourbon dripping down the wall like amber blood. The sensor caught my final whisper as she stormed out. Check your brake lines, Clara. Outside, the first spring storm cracked the sky open. Perfect weather for arson. The pawn ticket fluttered from Clara's Gucci clutch like a poison valentine. I smoothed the yellowed paper against my workbench, Sarah's old chemistry textbook weighing down the corners. One platinum Rolex Daytona. Serial number 348287. Loan value, $47,500. Dated 3 days after the Nevada Gaming Commission froze her assets. Margaret's raspy breathing fogged the garage window behind me. She wouldn't pawn Daddy's watch? I tapped the security monitor showing Clara's Escalade idling at my gate. Check the safe. The combination lock clicked open on the first try, her birthday, same as always. Inside, Gerald's gunmetal Rolex gleamed beside my wedding band and Sarah's neonatal bracelet. Margaret's choked sob echoed off the concrete walls. Replica, I said, tossing her the fake. Swapped it after your last hospice visit. The truth hit harder than betrayal. Clara's desperate fingerprints smudged the display case, oil-stained from when she'd sabotaged my hydraulic lift in '02, spilling brake fluid to frame me for workplace negligence. I still had the OSHA violation notice folded inside Sarah's favorite picture book. Margaret collapsed onto an oil drum, the counterfeit watch slipping through her fingers. She said the debts were manageable. $2.3 million to Vegas bookies isn't manageable. I pulled up the offshore wire transfers on my burner phone, each payment timed to Sarah's death anniversaries. Your sister's been commemorating our girl in her own special way. The garage door shuddered under Clara's furious kicks. Open up, you thieving bastards. Margaret lunged for the intercom. I caught her wrist, pressing the O2 sensor recorder into her palm. Her breath hitched as Clara's threats played back. Dying whores don't need trust funds. Your choice, I murmured. Play martyr or survivor. The door groaned upward before she could answer. Clara stormed in wielding a tire iron, her pupils blown wide from whatever she'd snorted in the driveway. Where's the fucking watch, Harold? Safe deposit box. I nudged the textbook, opened to Sarah's doodled margin note. Dad's secret recipe equals 1 point oil, 2 points vengeance. Along with your casino markers. The tire iron clattered as Clara lunged for the evidence. Margaret moved first, a feral shove sending her sister sprawling into the tool chest. Wrenches scattered like metallic bones, one clanging against the replica watch. Enough. Margaret's scream left blood speckling her lips. She stood trembling between us, the recorder clutched to her chest like a grenade pin. Clara scrambled up, suddenly registering the silence. What's she holding, Harold? Just memories. I clicked the garage door shut with Sarah's old key fob. Speaking of, remember this? The hydraulic lift controls whined to life. Clara's eyes darted to the brake fluid puddle spreading beneath her Louboutins. Same brand. Same size as the spill that cost me my dealership job. Poetic, I said, palming the OSHA notice. Don't you think? Margaret's whisper cut through the tension. The trust deadlines moved up. Settlements tomorrow at noon. Clara froze. So did I. The lie tasted sweet as antifreeze. Change the terms, did you? Margaret's knuckles whitened around the recorder. Daddy's lawyer called this morning. Something about accelerated disbursement. I watched the sisters' silent war, Clara's desperation versus Margaret's newfound spine. Let them cannibalize each other. Fine. I tossed the Rolex box into the brake fluid. But we do this my way. Clara dug for the watch, not noticing the security feed still running. Not seeing Margaret slip the recorder into her pocket. Not smelling the gasoline I'd poured an hour earlier. As the garage lights flickered, I struck Sarah's Zippo, the flame reflecting in 3 pairs of eyes, each burning with different shades of betrayal. The notary's office smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Clara had chosen the place well, a storefront between a pawn shop and a bail bondsman, its flickering open sign buzzing like a dying wasp. I adjusted my thrift store tie, the polyester itching like a guilty conscience, and watched Margaret fidget with the empty ring finger I'd stopped filling decades ago. Standard terms, Clara purred, sliding the prenup across a desk stained with circular marks from 1,000 sweating glasses. Protects Margaret's assets. I let my eyes glaze over the legalese, hunting for landmines. There it was, Section 4.3. In the event of spousal abandonment, all real property listed in Exhibit B reverts to the non-abandoning party. Exhibit B's attached survey map showed my cabin, the lithium-rich north pasture, even Sarah's overgrown treehouse. Abandonment's a strong word. I scratched my neck, activating the wire sewn into my collar. What constitutes abandoning dear Meg? Forgetting her birthday? Snoring too loud. Clara's pen tapped an impatient staccato. Failure to cohabitate for 72 consecutive hours post-disbursement. Margaret studied her chipped manicure. It's just procedure, Harold. I leaned back, the chair creaking like a gallows rope. Procedure. Right. From my pocket, I produced the corroded bolt that had sheared off Clara's Lexus brake line last night, held it up to the jaundiced light. Funny thing about abandonment. Sometimes the vehicle leaves before the driver does. Clara's nostrils flared. The bolt matched the ones missing from her SUV suspension, a fact she'd discover halfway down Dead Man's Pass tomorrow. The notary, a meth-eyed retiree, wheezed, "Sign here, here, and fuck all here." I scrawled my name with a flourish, adding the mechanical symbol for torque specifications, 72 FTLBS, where witnesses usually initialed. Let their lawyers Google that. Satisfied? I asked, pushing the document toward Margaret. Her pen hovered. Clara's stiletto jabbed her ribs under the table. Wait. My finger landed on Exhibit C. A grainy photo of Clara's Escalade parked at the cemetery gates last Halloween. What's this? Proof of moral turpitude? Clara snatched the page. Standard character clause. Ah, yes. I produced a matching photo from my wallet. Clara dumping gasoline cans behind my woodshed at 2:17 a.m. Must have been hell getting that shot with arson gloves on. The notary chose that moment to remember his lunch break. Margaret finally spoke, voice cracking. We're doing this for family, Harold. I pocketed the prenup copy, sticky with someone's ancient Coke residue. Funny. Sarah's definition of family never included fire starters and forged documents. Outside, a tow truck hauled Clara's brakeless SUV onto its flatbed. I tipped an imaginary hat. Best get moving, ladies. Big day tomorrow. Clara's scream carried 3 blocks. Margaret's silence carried further. At the cabin, I fed the prenup into Sarah's old shredder, watching abandonment become confetti. The real document, signed in vegetable ink that would fade in 48 hours, was already en route to Gerald's estate lawyer via a paralegal who owed me for rebuilding his Harley. The land would stay mine. The war, however, was just shifting gears. The courthouse fluorescents hummed like hornets trapped in glass. I adjusted Margaret's thrift store veil, yellowed lace that smelled of mothballs and regret, and watched Clara's reflection in the justice of the piece's bald spot. She'd chosen a pantsuit the color of dried blood, her ankle monitor flashing beneath the hem with each nervous tap of her Louboutin. We'll need a witness, I announced as the clerk reached for the license. Clara's head snapped up. The notary's right here. Ah, but Sarah deserves a front row seat. I gestured to the empty pews. Proper church ceremony. Full communion. Margaret's grip tightened on the wilted grocery store lilies. We agreed on simple, Harold. Did we? I plucked a petal, letting it spiral onto the cracked linoleum. Funny, I don't recall signing anything about venue restrictions. The justice cleared his throat, adjusting a tie stained with Egg McMuffin grease. Sir, if you'll just check the statute, I interrupted, slapping down a dog-eared law book from the county library. Montana Code 40-1-301. Solemnization must reflect the couple's spiritual convictions. I flipped to the highlighted passage. My convictions require stained glass and a 7-piece gospel choir. Clara's phone hit the floor, screen shattering like her composure. You scheming prick. The trust disperses at noon Tomo. Margaret's gasp drowned the rest. The fluorescent hum intensified. Tomorrow. I cocked my head, biting back a smile. Thought we had 10 days. Clara lunged across the dais, her perfume cloying as embalming fluid. Sign. Now. That's when I felt it. The ghost brush against my hip where my phone lived. Margaret turned away too quickly, her sleeve catching on my belt buckle. Trouble in paradise? The justice nodded to the security camera. We've got YouTube weddings every Tuesday. I let the silence stretch, counting Clara's carotid pulses visible beneath her spray tan. At 12, I sighed. Fine, but we're using my vows. The burner phone buzzed in my pocket, right on schedule. I made a show of checking it. Ah, the hospital. Must be about those test results. Margaret palmed her own throat. The cancer. Prostate, actually. I clicked off the auto-generated reminder about Jiffy Lube coupons. Seems I've got 6 months. Tops. Chaos erupted. Clara's shriek. Margaret's wail. The justice Googling prostate cancer survival rates. Through the commotion, I watched Margaret edge toward the exit, my missing phone's outline visible through her clutch. Let her run. Let her think she'd stolen advantage. The real device, tucked in my boot since breakfast, vibrated with a confirmation alert. My lips grazed Clara's ear as security escorted her out for causing a disturbance. "Tell your bookies I said hi." Outside, spring rain sheeted across the parking lot. Margaret waited beneath a flickering street lamp, her stolen prize clutched tight. "Harold, save it." I opened the passenger door of my '86 Ford, its engine still warm from the mechanic who'd swapped the brake lines. "St. Bart's at dawn. Don't be late." As she slid inside, I tossed the law book into a puddle. The highlighted passage? Grocery coupons from 1997. The clock tower chimed midnight. Somewhere, a trust fund lawyer poured his first whiskey. Game. Set. Checkmate. The garage security monitor flickered to life with the grainy black and white horror show of Clara picking my safe. I watched through the junkyard office window, the missing phone's absence burning in my pocket like a phantom limb. On screen, Clara's silhouette danced in the greenish night vision glow, her lockpick set glinting as she muttered curses that the camera's lip-read software would later translate into poetry. She'd chosen the witching hour, 3:17 a.m., Sarah's birth minute, but miscalculated the angle of the fisheye lens I'd hidden inside a vintage spark plug display. Classic Clara. All ambition, no attention to detail. The safe door creaked open. Out tumbled the ghosts I'd bottled for decades. Margaret's perfumed stationery filled with another man's promises, the motel receipts folded into origami swans, the Polaroid of her laughing on a balcony I'd never built. Clara's hands shook as she photographed each betrayal, her phone casting a sickly blue light on evidence older than our daughter's grave. I sipped diesel-black coffee, tracking her progress. Let her steal the past. The future required different ammunition. When the monitor flashed red, motion sensors tripped at the property line, I rose. My boots crunched through frost-rimed grass toward the cabin, the .38's weight of familiar comfort. Inside, Clara's shadow froze mid-reach for the whiskey decanter. Looking for a nightcap? I flicked the lights on, revealing her loot spread across Sarah's old art desk. Or just rifling through my trauma? She recovered fast, brandishing a love letter dated 2 days before Sarah's conception. Who's Michael? The name hit like a misfiring piston. Memory fragments. Margaret's girls' weekend in Spokane, the wrong number calls, the OBGYN's raised eyebrow at Sarah's Rh-negative blood type. Dead. I cocked the hammer. Like your sense of self-preservation. Clara's laugh echoed off the tool racks. Margaret's little secret, not mine. She tossed the photo, Margaret pregnant and glowing in another man's arms. But don't worry. This stays buried for a price. I noted the USB drive peeking from her breast pocket. Footage from the courthouse altercation, no doubt. Her insurance policy. Name it. The lithium deposits. She leaned over the survey maps, red nails circling my north pasture. Sign them over tonight, or tomorrow's trust meeting gets explosive. Outside, dawn bled across the valley. I counted 7 crows perched on the property line. Gerald's old superstition about bad luck. Deal. I scrawled fake initials on the deed transfer, the forged signature bleeding through cheap carbon paper. But the USB stays. Her triumphant grin died when I palmed the drive, having pickpocketed it during her victory strut. Old habits. You'll regret this, she hissed, snatching the bogus deed. Already do. I ejected the drive's contents into the wood stove. Footage of Margaret's confession, Clara's arson plans, a decade of sins melting into ash. Tell Michael I said hello. The slam of her car door shook Sarah's repaired photo frame. I waited until taillights vanished, then opened the safe's false back. The real letters, detailing Clara's embezzlement from Gerald's estate, smiled up at me, untouched. Cold determination settled like Arctic air. Let them dig their graves with borrowed shovels. I'd pour the concrete. The letters crinkled like ancient battle maps as I spread them across Sarah's childhood bedspread. Margaret's perfume still clung to the paper, Shalimar, same as the night she'd claimed to be at her sister's, while Michael's hands explored territories I'd mortgaged my soul to protect. Explain this. I tapped the Polaroid tucked between pages 132 to 133 of Gray's Anatomy, Margaret's medical textbook turned infidelity scrapbook. The photo showed her 7 months pregnant, cradling Sarah's ultrasound while Michael nuzzled her neck in a Seattle hotel room I'd never seen. Margaret's fingers found the scar where her wedding band used to sit. Clara found out. Threatened to tell you unless I, her voice fractured like cheap porcelain, unless I helped her access Daddy's trust. I let the silence curdle, studying the ultrasound's date stamp, 2 weeks before our anniversary trip to Yellowstone. Sarah's first kicks had syncopated with Old Faithful's eruptions. Turns out volcanoes weren't the only forces capable of catastrophic explosions. Blackmail? I palmed the corroded lug nut from Clara's sabotaged Lexus, its grooves still caked with Montana clay. Funny. I've got security footage of you both toasting with champagne after the divorce finalized. Her flinch confirmed what the letters implied. Their alliance predated Gerald's trust by decades. The cabin walls seemed to lean closer, eager witnesses to this long-overdue autopsy. Tires crunched gravel outside. Through Sarah's bedroom window, I watched Clara materialize from the sheriff's cruiser like a specter, her designer funeral blacks swapped for Walmart sweatpants. Performance art for the law. Harold? Margaret's whisper carried the same tremor as when Sarah spiked her first fever. Whatever happens. The battering ram of Clara's fist drowned her out. Sheriff. He's keeping her prisoner. I met them at the threshold, the Polaroid burning in my back pocket. Sheriff Dawson's hand hovered near his sidearm. I was tracking the oil stains on my coveralls like criminal evidence. Mr. Cresswell. His nod carried the weight of 3 generations of small-town grudges. Got a report you're withholding medication from a terminally ill spouse. Clara brandished an empty pill bottle, your Sodiol, same as her fake cancer script. He's been starving her treatment. Look how thin she is. Margaret shriveled under the collective stare, her collarbones sharp as suspension cables. I noted the sheriff's wedding band, same cheap tungsten model I'd seen him polishing at Bud's Tavern. Terminal illness, huh? I ambled to the fridge, retrieving Margaret's chemotherapy pills from behind the expired milk. Funny, these are just vitamin D supplements. I rattled the bottle, horse-sized tablets clattering like dice. Costco special. Ask Bud, he takes the same ones for his erectile dysfunction. Clara's gasp over-dramatized the spring breeze. The sheriff squinted at the label, recognition dawning. Ma'am, he sighed, turning to Margaret, you want to explain? Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again, a beach fish gasping for lies that wouldn't come. I pressed the Polaroid into Clara's palm, her fingers instinctively closing around the evidence. Careful, sis. Wouldn't want the sheriff to see your family album. The standoff cracked with the metallic shriek of Clara's Lexus careening into the driveway, front bumper dangling by a thread, brake lines severed. Her scream pierced the morning calm. Coincidence, I murmured, savoring the word. Like your sudden concern for Margaret's health. Sheriff Dawson tipped his hat, retreating toward his cruiser with the weary gait of a man who'd seen this rodeo too many times. Clara scrambled after him, spewing threats that evaporated in the April sun. Alone again, Margaret reached for my arm. I stepped back, watching her reflection fracture in Sarah's dusty vanity mirror. You knew, she whispered. About Michael? I extracted the ultrasound photo, its edges softened by decades of secret handling. Sarah deserved better than your lies. The confession hung between us, not absolution, but a verdict. Outside, Clara's curses harmonized with the crow's mocking chorus. The game board was set. Time to flip the table. The sheriff's cruiser hadn't even cleared the driveway when Old Man Thompson emerged from his rusted Airstream, clutching a VHS tape labeled Bingo Nights 98-03. His overalls reeked of diesel and decades of grudges held. Caught that Hellcat on my game camera, he rasped, spitting Copenhagen into Clara's abandoned latte cup. Trespassing by the propane tanks last Tuesday. Muttered something about inheritance being her birthright. The sheriff paused, hand on his door handle, recognizing the timestamp on Thompson's handheld, a relic from when surveillance systems still used tapes. Clara's Lexus appeared at 2:43 a.m., headlights off, her silhouette caught mid-snarl by infrared. That's civil court stuff, the sheriff muttered, but the way his jaw tightened said he'd seen Clara's type before, rich enough to cause problems, dumb enough to leave evidence. I waited until the cruiser's dust settled before cracking open the mason jar Thompson offered. The moonshine burned through the temporary relief like napalm. How much she offer you? Thompson's grin revealed 3 teeth and 0 remorse. $5,000 to say I saw you beat Margaret. Told her I'd do it for 10, then kept the security footage instead. The landline rang as he left. My lawyer's voice cut through the static, a former JAG officer who'd traded courtroom battles for Montana's quiet. Gerald's trust has a scorched earth clause, she said. Section 22C, any provable fraud voids all disbursements. Funds revert to the estate's residual beneficiaries. I traced the bullet hole in my kitchen wall, a memento from teaching Sarah to shoot. Residual being you. The word detonated in the silence. Through the window, Clara's Escalade backfired, coughing black smoke as she peeled out. Need proof of conspiracy, the lawyer added. Emails. Recordings. A signed confession would be in the mail. I hung up, eyeing the notarized prenup Clara had demanded. Her own signature looped beneath the clause forfeiting everything if fraud was proven, a flourish of arrogance in peacock blue ink. The resolve crystallized like ice on a fuel line. No more reacting. No more defense. In the garage, I powered up Sarah's old camcorder, the one she'd used to film pretend newscasts about justice prevailing. Slid in Thompson's tape. Watched Clara's midnight prowling in reverse. The game had changed. So had the player. The stained glass saints watched in judgment as I clutched my chest, the arrhythmia simulator from Sarah's old science fair project humming against my ribs. Clara's pen hovered over the revised prenup, her reflection warped in the chalice we'd stolen from our wedding reception. Sign it, she hissed at Margaret, shoving the document across the communion rail. Before he croaks and takes the trust with him. I let my head loll against the pew, one eye cracked to track Margaret's trembling hands. The camera hidden in the crucifix above the altar whirred softly, its lens focused on the clause where Clara had scribbled, all marital assets, over whiteout smears. Margaret's gaze flicked to the emergency inhaler in my pocket, the one she'd used during Sarah's asthma attacks. What about Harold's condition? Collateral damage. Clara uncapped a fountain pen filled with notary ink. Sign, or I'll tell the cops about the morphine you siphoned from hospice. The arrhythmia box beeped faster, syncing with the wall clock's countdown to noon. Through half-closed lids, I watched Margaret's finger trace the fresh ink, a forged provision granting Clara power of attorney over the lithium deposits. I can't. Margaret's whisper carried across the empty nave. Sarah loved this church. Clara's slap echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Sentimental bitch. That retard's been dead 20 years. The arrhythmia monitor flatlined on cue. My body convulsed in a practiced spasm, knocking over the collection plate. Silver dollars rolled toward the altar like Judas coins. Now, Clara screamed, stampeding toward the sacristy phone to call her bought-off medic. Margaret knelt beside me, her tears splashing onto the vial of stage blood I'd rigged to burst under pressure. Her shaking hand found the simulator's off switch and froze. You knew, she breathed, staring at the LED display reading midnight. My fingers closed around her wrist, death grip firm. Sign nothing. Outside, Clara's medic van skidded into the parking lot, its siren wailing. Margaret's resolve hardened as she recognized the driver, the same EMT who'd botched Sarah's resuscitation. When Clara charged back and waving the documents, Margaret stood, tearing the prenup along its fresh ink. Rot in hell. The hidden camera captured it all, Clara's roar of frustration, the medic's aborted sprint down the aisle, my hand slipping the arrhythmia box into Clara's coat pocket as I revived. Miracle recovery, I croaked, rising to straighten Sarah's photo on the memorial wall. Must have been the power of prayer. Clara's phone buzzed with an alert, the lithium rights transferred to an offshore LLC under Thompson's name. Her howl shook the votive candles. As the medic dragged her away, Margaret pressed a cold key into my palm, the safe deposit box containing Sarah's true paternity test. I'm sore. I pocketed the key, its teeth biting into flesh. Save it for the judge. Outside, spring sunlight blazed through the Judas window, casting Clara's shadow in crimson across the altar steps. Checkmate. The estate lawyers' conference table mirrored the river's surface where we'd scattered Sarah's ashes, cold, polished, incapable of holding warmth. I set the digital recorder next to Clara's untouched mineral water, its screen flashing midnight like a countdown to detonation. Let's dispense with the theatrics, Clara sneered, though her fingers betrayed her, shredding a monogrammed cocktail napkin into confetti. The trust disperses in 18 minutes. Sign the damn. I pressed play. Her own voice slithered through the speakers, crisp and venomous. Burn the cabin with him inside. Lithium pays triple on insurance claims. Margaret's gasp harmonized with the lawyer's. A prim woman whose bifocals couldn't hide her recognition of Clara's forged notary stamp on the deeds. "Ms. Whitaker," she interrupted, holding a signature page to the light. "This appears to bear the county clerk's seal from 2003. He died in '99. Chaos erupted. Clara vaulted across the table, her manicured claws aimed at my eyes. I sidestepped, letting momentum carry her into the vintage Wurlitzer jukebox Sarah had adored. Glass shattered, vinyl records skittering like black beetles across the floor. "You ruined everything," Clara howled, clutching a jagged shard of blue moon. Margaret stepped between us, tears cutting through her Botox mask. "I never stopped loving you, Harold. Everything I did." The lie curdled in the air between us. I tossed her the ultrasound photo from Michael's love letters, now laminated as evidence. "Save your performance for probate court." The lawyer cleared her throat, brandishing a magnifier over Clara's forged signature. "These documents are null. Per Gerald's codicil, the trust reverts to Mr. Cresswell." Clara's scream died as the wall clock struck noon. Somewhere, a fax machine word, "Thompson's LLC finalizing the lithium rights transfer." I pocketed the recorder, its job done. "Enjoy your inheritance, Clara." Margaret grabbed my sleeve, desperation bleeding through her perfume. "We can start over. Like before." Before? I pried her fingers loose, one manicured talon at a time. "You mean when you were fucking my brother? Or stealing from our daughter's college fund?" The lawyer discreetly slid a check across the table. $2,000,000 payable to Harold J. Cresswell. Clara lunged for it, but the sheriff's cuffs intercepted her mid-swipe. "Elder abuse," he muttered, snapping the bracelets tight. "And forgery. Let's go." Margaret's whisper chased me into the parking lot. "I meant it, you know. About loving you." I turned, sunlight glinting off the repaired photo frame in my truck window. Sarah's smile whole again, preserved under bulletproof glass. "Funny," I said, firing up the engine. "So did I." The check fluttered from my hand as I drove off, snatched by the same spring wind that once carried our daughter's laughter. Let the lawyers fight over scraps. The real treasure was watching Clara's empire burn in the rearview. The check fluttered between us like a surrender flag, its zeros glinting under the bare bulb where Sarah's dream catcher once hung. Margaret's chipped nail polish hovered over the amount, $100,000, the exact sum I'd spent fighting for custody after the divorce. Poetic fucking justice. "Take it," I said, nudging the whiskey tumbler she'd once thrown at my head. "Or don't. Either way, you're gone by sundown." Her laugh came out a broken thing, all splintered edges and rust. "You think money fixes this?" She gestured to the repaired photo frame, Sarah's smile still slightly crooked under the new glass. "We were a family." I unscrewed the flask from my Gulf War days, the one she'd packed in my duffel with a note reading, "Don't come back. Families don't fake cancer. Or paternity." The words landed like a mortar round. Margaret crumpled, fingers scrabbling at the check as if it were a lifeline. Then she froze, squinting at the memo line. "For services rendered, Sarah's grave maintenance, 1998 to 2023. "You monster," she hissed. I shrugged, tossing her car keys into the wood stove. The Camry's parked at Greyhound. "Seats 14. She lunged, but age and whiskey slowed her. We collapsed against the workbench in a grotesque parody of our first kiss, her fist pounding my chest to the rhythm of Clara's jailhouse rants playing on the police scanner. "You've become just like her," Margaret spat, breath sour with defeat. I stilled, her words slithering into the cracks armor couldn't seal. Through the window, the first star flickered. Sarah's nightlight, she'd called it, back when monsters only lived in closets. "Differences," I said, peeling her claws from my shirt. "I admit what I am." The check crackled as she stuffed it into her bra, the motion rehearsed from 100 hotel bar transactions. At the threshold, she paused, a silhouette of every goodbye that ever gutted me. "She'd hate you for this." I thumbed the bullet hole in Sarah's photo frame, the one from when I'd taught her to shoot, her laughter echoing through pines now leased to lithium miners. Know what Sarah hated most? I clicked the safety off my .38, not aiming, just remembering. Liars. The screen door slammed. Tires spat gravel. Somewhere, Clara's bail hearing devolved into chaos. I drank until the stars blurred into one searing truth. Victory tastes like bourbon and blood, and the only thing worse than losing is winning. The check cleared at dawn. The check stub made better kindling than closure. I fed it to the wood stove along with the last of Margaret's letters, watching Sarah's name curl into smoke above the $2 million donation line. The cancer fund director had wanted a photo op, me holding an oversized check next to some ribbon-cutting bureaucrat. I sent instead the ultrasound photo with Michael's fingerprints burned off by lighter fluid. Let them puzzle over that Rorschach blot. The postcard arrived in a blizzard of lithium mine offers, its sunny Boca Raton palm trees clashing with the smudged obit notice rubber-stamped on back. Margaret Whitaker Cresswell, 65, succumbed after a long illness. I snorted. The only long illness she'd ever had was chronic self-interest. Her ashes got the same treatment as our wedding album, tossed into the Clark Fork River during spring thaw. The current carried them past what's left of the North Pasture, where Thompson's crew now harvests enough lithium to power every electric hearse in the state. Sunset finds me on the porch Sarah painted turquoise the summer before she died. The repaired photo warps her smile slightly where the epoxy set too thick, but I've memorized every pixel. Clara's doing time in Deer Lodge. Margaret's feeding catfish. The trust money's buying some other kid decades. I light my cigar with the edge of the smoldering postcard, the flames licking up to erase beloved mother from the newsprint. The lie chars faster than the ink. In the cabin's deepening shadows, Sarah's eyes follow me from behind unbroken glass. The cracks are still there if you know where to look, hairline fractures catching the light like veins of, or in bedrock. I toast the night's first star. Still got the best view, kiddo. Somewhere downstream, a fish breaks the surface. The ripples fade before reaching shore.